So right now we need to start implementing the delete transaction logic. So back to this attachment, just to explain the steps that we need to go through to be able to implement this task. This is the transaction document that's existing in the Azure Cosmos DB database, and the first thing to be able to remove transaction is to basically implement get transaction by ID. We don't have this functionality yet, so we need to add that so that the full transaction, including tags and attachments and everything else, come by. Now we need to iterate over attachments and delete the attachment in case it's available. So the attachment is existing in two places. First, the actual file that's actually existing in the blob container, and the reference for the file which is existing in the transaction. So by just removing the transaction document, the reference will be removed. But before that, we need to remove the blob itself, which is the actual file, from the blob container, in case, of course, there is any. Third thing, we remove the transaction itself from the Cosmos DB, and finally we adjust the wallet balance. What we mean by that is whenever we add any transaction, either it's an income or outcome or an expense, we upgrade the wallet, the overall wallet balance. Either we decrease it or we increase it. By removing a transaction, we need to roll back that change. So if it's an income, if this transaction was an income, so basically we need to reduce the wallet balance after removing it, because that income increased the balance, but right now it's removed, so we need to decrease it, and the opposite, and vice versa. So we will, if it's an expense, then it reduced the wallet balance. After removing the transaction, we need to increase that wallet balance at that amount. So those are the steps that we are going to do. Right now, let's move to the code. So before I get started implementing this logic, we just forget a little step in the absurd of transaction. If we go here, we already agreed that after we check for the attachments, we need to actually remove them from the attachments container, from the attachments reference in the Azure Cosmos DB, because the URLs will be referenced actually here. So to do that, all we need to do is just saying await attachments repo .delete patch async. This is the one that we have created a couple videos ago, and we pass the attachments, and that's it. That's how we can basically remove it. So right now, let's get started implementing the get by ID. So right now, if I go to data project interfaces, open the transactions repo, we already have delete async we created earlier. I will add a transaction. So here, get by ID async. So what do we need here? Of course, it's the ID, but do we need something else? Of course. We can retrieve this data using the ID, normally like using a query, select star from ID, from the container where ID equals the ID, but that's not enough. That will execute a query across all the partitions, and it will be a bit costly, not too much. To retrieve the transaction the most efficient way, we need to pass the partitioning key. So we can use the read item async method, and it is basically very much more optimized cost-wise and performance-wise. And our project is all about performance, so we need to pass the partitioning key. And as you know, the partitioning key for the transaction is the user ID and the year of the transaction. That's how we defined it when we created the model of the transaction. Just make a quick recap. So you can see here we have user ID year, and it is being set whenever we, here we go. It's being set in here. I think I have an error here. Yeah, that's right. So user ID equals user ID years, which is this property is being user ID and the creation date dot year. So basically we need to pass the year to get the full partitioning key. I will go to the class right now, and I will write the implementation. So async task transaction get by ID async string ID string user ID and integer year. Of course, we need to make the traditional checks or white space, of course, like that, and the same here. Okay, that's good. Right now, I will type partition key value equals, it is the user ID underscore here, and right now we type item or result equals await container dot read item async. Read item async allows you to get an item by ID. This is the most optimized way to get an item, basically without doing a query. So ID, and we pass a new partition key like that, and finally we return result dot resource. I can already return the result, which will be casted to transaction, but I want to keep it like this so I can put a breakpoint and show you some diagnostics and how performant is this way comparing to making a traditional query. So in case those data is not available, what we can do, we can still do that. Basically, we can make those optional by providing this with null, make this nullable, and also set it by default to null. And here we do a check. If those are null, so we don't have the partition key, so we basically make a query which is select from C where c.id equals the ID. But we don't need to do that because always we have those values, and we are going to see how we can provide that through the postman and on the client. When we build the client, we will see also how we can provide this. So this is the most optimized way and the most recommended too. Right now we have get by ID, we already have delete, and we already have right now in the storage service that's existing in the server.functions iStorage service, we have delete file async that takes the full path or the URL of the file in the blob container. Right now we are going to create a new Azure function to put all this stuff together. Right now, create new Azure function, and I will type here delete Azure, delete transaction, like that, and hit add. That's great. So let's inject some stuff. Private read only, transactions, I'll call it transaction repo. We need the iStorage service, and we need the wallets repo. Like that. Let's put like this, and let's add those to the constructor. Here we go. So we have them in the constructor right now. Cool. So I will call it here delete transaction triggered. Okay, cool. So I'll remove all of this. We need to make it delete. It's only a delete type, delete. And we will ask for var ID. We take that from the query parameter and we type var year equals year. And of course we have the user ID, which is user ID and fetch from the token later. So let's add to do, but for the development purpose, it's user ID always. Right now, let's do some checks. If string.is null or white space, the ID, then we need to return new bad request object result, new API error response. We type ID is required. Just like that. The same for the year. Year is required. Of course, this year right now is a string, so we need to translate or convert that into an integer. And to do that, I'm going to use the int.try parse this integer, and I will pass the year out for year as integer. Okay, so if it is invalid, then what we do is type year is invalid if it failed to translate that into an integer. That's great. So right now we have all the values that we need. So let's start by get the transaction. Var transaction equals get by ID. This is the ID, the user ID, the year as integer. Right now we need to make sure, of course, we need to check if it's null. If it is null, we're just going to return not found result, just like that. So it's return 404. Cool. Now we need to make sure about the attachments, that delete the attachments in case. there is any attachments. So let's do a check. Transaction dot attachments not null, and transaction dot attachments dot any. So we have a transaction. Right now we make a for each over that transaction dot attachments like that, and we basically call the storage service dot delete. We just pass the item, or let's call this the URL, just like that. Great. We don't need to remove any references from the database, as I have mentioned, because they have already removed in the creative process from the attachments table, and right now the attachments or the URLs are mentioned inside the transaction. So when you remove it, it will be removed. Let's go and remove the transaction itself. Delete async, this will remove. The last thing is to adjust the balance, and to adjust the balance we need to pass the amount to add or to reduce, to increase or decrease the wallet balance. And so amount to add equals transaction dot is income. If it is income, if this transaction, the deleted one, was an income, so it increased the wallet balance, then we need to decrease it. So we type transaction dot amount. Otherwise we need to increase it because it was an expense and it decreased it. Right now we removed it, so we need to flip the operation. And finally we just type wallets dot update balance async, and we pass transaction dot wallet ID, then we type user ID, and finally amount to add. This is it, nothing else is needed. Here we can just say new API response, and we can just pass a message which is like transaction has been deleted successfully. Okay, this is it. So this is the implementation step by step, which is good implementation. Right now I'm going to run and to make sure that everything is working fine. Also make sure that everything is running, like we have here the Postman. I already have the Azure Cosmos DB emulator running, and let me close this. And I have also the Azure Storage Explorer up and running, and here we have the blob container attachments also running. So this is the function. What I will start using, the first thing I will start doing is I will insert a transaction and a fresh one. Then we are going to remove it. So I will also upload this transaction with a file. So to start, first we need to use the upload file or the upload attachment endpoint. So let's pick an attachment. Of course, you need to make sure that the attachment must be, if it's an image, it must be like an actual image for like a receipt or something. Otherwise, the AI service will reject it. So I'm going to pick this, and then I will hit send. So it is being uploaded, done. So we take the URL like that. Great. Now we go to insert transaction, and this is the insert transaction we have used earlier, but I have added another one like transport, and this time we have attachments array. So let's add this like that. That's great. So we have an attachment. It's 50.45. So let's see what is the wallet balance that we had earlier. So it is 918.5 or 55. So 918.55. This is an expense, so it should reduce it by 50. And let's try to add. Going to hit insert the transaction. Okay, we got internal server error. Interesting. So let's see what we got in here. Executing function, upsert transaction, value cannot be null, parameter URLs. Okay, where is the URLs parameter? Let's go to insert upsert transaction. This is the upsert. And okay, here we go. So let me try to put a breakpoint. Try to send that again. Okay. URLs is not null basically. Sorry, I have here a big error. This one is flipped. So if this one is null, just if it's null, then through this exception. If it's empty, just leave. Just retrieve null. Like if it's URLs dot any, if it doesn't contain any, then return enumerable dot empty attachment. Okay, so this one retrieves an empty enumerable. Sorry for the error. Good that we discovered that. So right now let's run again and try to upload this one more time. Cool. Let's hit send. Okay, we don't need this anymore, I think. I think it will work fine. Okay, we got invalid attachments. Okay, we got one more error. Interesting why we're getting all those errors. So I think we need this. So let's send. So here we have data.attachments. Okay, this is the one that we have. Let's see what this one is returning. Okay, URL as string. We have it like that. Okay, that looks right. That looks right. Then a query string. Okay. So it didn't retrieve any attachments. Okay, let's go to the database here, and I already have the URL, so let me copy that. I will go to attachment, new SQL query. I'll call it where c.url in this. Hit execute. Yep, we got one. So that means we have something wrong in that. We have something wrong in here. And let's double check again. URL as string. Let me copy that. Execute. Ooh, interesting. That's right. So we have something very, very weird here. Query. Parameters. Okay, so let me try to remove this and take that to here, put a breakpoint. Here we go. Right now it's retrieved. I think, okay. So I learned something new. Actually, I didn't know that about Cosmos DB, but it seems that Cosmos DB is already adding that single quotation. So inside in the engine, when you are supplying this parameter, and that's why it's not able to find it. But when you removed it, it found it. So right now we already have that result, which is so good. So the process continued and we got the transaction added. So right now it retrieved the ID. Let's copy this ID because we needed to implement the delete. And if we go to the database, if we search for this wallet, you can see that the wallet has been reduced by 50.55. So right now we decided, okay, we need to roll back this transaction. We don't need it anymore. So what should happen is, as you can see here, we have attachment that's already uploaded, and we have that transaction. If we execute a new SQL query where c.id equals this, and if we hit execute selection, so you can see that this is our transaction. So we need to remove it, and by removing it, this has to be removed. The bullet balance has to come back to 918, and this one must be removed from the blob container. And what else? Yeah, I think this is it. So to remove it, but one more thing I need to show you is, let's check the query stats here. So you can see that this one costs 2.83 request units to fetch this item by ID. So let's try right now to run the project, to run this, the delete. I will create a new request. So, okay, add request. This request called delete transaction, and it is delete. Great. And right now here we pass the method, which is localhost, something like that, but it is delete transaction, and we need to pass ID, which is the ID that we have, and year equals 2023. We know that for now. This is everything. Let's put a breakpoint, make sure that our method's working as we wanted it to work. So we hit send, we go, we got it, and then here we got the ID right, we have the year, that's right. Okay, right now we have the year as transaction. So let's see how this one will retrieve. This is the partition key value. I think that's also right. Okay, but this one didn't. So here we have something that actually went wrong. So what happened? If we check exception while executing function, delete transaction, response status code doesn't indicate success not found. Okay, so this one was searching for something that is not right. That is interesting. Let's see if we take a look at the results here, and oh, sorry, the partitioning key is okay, one more stupid error from my side. It is not dash, it is dash, not underscore. We run that again. And let's click send one more time. Okay, send. Here we go, we got it. Let's keep going. That's what we're interested in. Oh, that's the right value. And here we go, we got it. So let's see. Yep, we got it. Let's check right now some diagnostics here. And if we open value, and here we have so one of the stuff we can see is the request to charge. So where is the request to charge? Duration. Interesting. Children. Routing, not interested. Here we go. So we have request to charge, it is 1. So you can notice the difference between this call and here it's 2.83, while there it's only 1, which is the minimum. Because each request unit is reading a single document that's worth 1 kilobyte per second, and this one is, I don't think it's 1 kilobyte. I think it is 700 bytes. Okay, that's a good. So it's 1. Well, this one takes more, and if we have millions of transactions, it will take much more than that, because it has to search across all the partitions. But when we say get by ID specifically and we pass the partitioning key, it is the fastest way possible. So we save too much cost, because for this, which is just have a couple of transactions, samples, and it take like almost 3 times the cost of getting it by ID. So that's something to be careful while you are doing this implementation. There an attachment, of course, so we need to remove this attachment. Let's see, we already have this method. Okay, must be removed. Let's go to here, hit refresh. Great, it is removed. We achieved the checkpoint. Now let's remove this user by ID here. That's right. Execute the delete. Deleted. Okay, is it an income or an expense? It's an expense. So amount to add is 50.45. We need to increase the wallet balance by this amount. So if we do that, that's it. Now we hit continue. We go to this. We hit execute. We shouldn't find it, which is right. Right now we go to this one, and notice if we execute this query, you're going to see that it is back to 918.55. So our logic is just working perfect. We have seen some errors, but we also resolved that, which was very good. So right now our application is in a very good state. The next operation to implement is the update. It's going to be something very, very similar. And after that, we can start the listing, which will be the last thing. So we still have two main operations to finish, and then we move to securing our functions with the Azure Active Directory B2C. So if you are enjoying this, don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe for the channel to support me for doing more and more of this stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.